Okay, we're going to continue our discussion of the evolution of computers. This set, Lecture 1, concentrates primarily on the early years, and we started off with Charles Babbage, and then we discussed the efforts of Conrad Zuse and some of the others. And so now we'll proceed on to another set of early pioneers. And this one here is Freddie Williams. Freddie Williams actually built the first working computer with a stored program. The gentlemen in America, Mr. Shockley and Mr. Eckert, had not actually made a working model as yet, and Dr. Freddie Williams, who was working for Cambridge, no, that was Maurice Wilkes, University of Manchester, got the job done. Now, in June of 1946, Dr. Williams visited the Moore School of Engineering, where the two Americans were involved with their project, and observed what they were doing, and found that their one weakness that they had was they did not have a sufficient electronic storage, and that's what Freddie Williams is primarily known for, is creating the first electronic storage system that was functional and worked. Dr. Williams had worked in research from radar during World War II, and this was more or less of a follow-up, and so as a result, the first one to actually build a working machine would have been Dr. Freddie Williams at the University of Manchester. Another gentleman who was also involved in the early, here's Freddie Williams, and there's a picture of the first machine that he built. This was the Manchester Mark I, and a lovely piece of equipment, don't you think? And this was the first working model ever actually built. Maurice Wilkes from Cambridge University built the EDSAC, and he in the summer of 1946, he was visiting the Moore School lectures on electronic computers, and when he got back, he started building this EDSAC in 1949, and then in 1951, he published with two colleagues the first book appearing on computer programming. That's Maurice Wilkes, and he is another pioneer who built the EDSAC, and he is another pioneer who did visit and get some information at the Moore School of Engineering. This gentleman here is Alan Turing. Alan Turing is, to this presenter, probably the most interesting of the early pioneers in computers, because Mr. Turing worked within the British service trying to break German codes during World War II. The place that they did this was called Bletchley Park, and here is Mr. Turing discussing some issues with some of the other people at Bletchley Park, and here you see some ladies working on the machine that they actually built to break that German code, and the machine was called the Colossus. And the machine that you see pictured here was actually the device that created those codes that Colossus was trying to work on. So Mr. Turing was very instrumental, a mathematician, very instrumental in the Bletchley Park efforts to break German code. But Mr. Turing was far more interesting than that, because he was the first person to suggest that a computer could do more than compute. He was the first person to really write, and he was doing this as early as the mid-1930s, that it would be possible that we could build a machine that you might consider able to think. He built his first computer. The computer that he built was called the ACE, and finally quit working on it when he became discouraged, because everybody wanted to use it to do computations, and he was really interested in exploring how a computer could be made to do other functions than just compute. And Alan Turing is considered by many to be the father of computer science and the father of artificial intelligence, because he has set up some demonstrations of a person working on a keyboard and communicating with an entity on the other side, and they did not know whether that entity was a human being or a person or a computer. And the question was, could they determine which they were dealing with, a human or a machine? And that was part of his efforts. So Alan Turing was a fascinating fellow. Now that covers pretty much the early stages, but there's one more thing that really set the boundary between generations of computers, and that is this device right here, the transistor. We already talked about how, did I spell transistor right? I really don't remember. Yes, I did. We talked about the fact that the vacuum tube had its problems. It was hot, and it would burn out, and it consumed a lot of energy. And the transistor was invented in the early 1950s, and the people that were involved were these three gentlemen right here: John Bardeen, Walter Brayton, and William Shockley. And they were working on this as partners at Bell Labs, working with it on this at Bell Labs, although they eventually separated. And by the time the transistor was actually on the market, two different companies took credit for it, Texas Instruments and Fairchild Electronics in California, because they had separated and gone to work for those two companies, and it released at about the same time. These gentlemen won the Nobel Prize for this effort in the development of the transistor, and the transistor was probably the most significant hardware change up to that point in the evolution of computers. This concludes the online lectures that I intended to do for this portion of the evolution of a computer. There are other portions coming up next. However, much of this information is available to you on a video that can also be found on this site, an excellent video. It's the series is called Giant Brains. It's been around for a while, but I would encourage you to search for the Giant Brains video on this website and watch that and really see a much more interesting presentation of this material with a lot of other very good information.